Is everyone good?
No, hold on. Hold up. I'm good.
Let's say, Stephanie.
I'm good.
Perfect. Permissibility, possession of firm, 8-point epistemics, we wouldn't be able to start a strain of reasoning. We'd have to question the reason, presuming negative and coherent, relies on some presumptive truth about the justice in the world generally, put into which we naturally believe to make true, e.g. officially, by name, you believe me, and transcendental truths go. We drive many through conceptual frames with the others, infinity, interest, assimilation, which elicits more obligations too. We must categorize classification, things independent and familiar with finding perception, everything is relation, your study contains from the your world, having dinner with the person, the face of the other, not similar to infinite, the sense of being gospel, the cognitive categories, everyone keeps the nature hidden with themselves, it's not about you and self, and the changes of your being, you become a bit of the mystery of the other, one no longer self-project, is reference of the mystery of the other, and totalization of the attempt to reduce the other to an object, denies our obligation, preserve the other's mystery, the standard, this is an ethical paper shiny. If ideas are inventions of the mind, the interpretation of something that refer to real part from my interpretation, ideas cannot be found any time to person by idea to be real, close up the connection, this balance denies autonomy, totalization with the other, set rational categories, I know the other before the other, breaking totalization, deny others, the other totalization is ethical, the standard is rejecting totalization of the other, in fact, when the app is not consequential, so utilizing the intrinsic intent to describe characteristics, consequential, so fails, equal, indestructible, logical, looking to past, but the future comes to the past, singular, equal, and butterfly, fetish, consequences, future consequences, can if it didn't get to, we're already indebted to the other, which prevents any attempt to return transition, past, to find the future with history, chapter 23. It is possible to consider myself true, being alive before I can make any future families of already dedicated the other because of time when subject to be starting murder, constantly from murder, and transcendental ego. This history cannot be reduced to humanity because multiplicity of events over Romans cannot be similar with challenge, liveness, of the spread. It respects every single here and now. Prefer additionally, first performativity, debate and language blend the underload of the other because otherwise the judgment completely understands whether the walking the right language presupposes the gap in understandings to actors like naturalization simultaneously, defines responsibilities to justify his existence. Critically 7. Democratization is not able to make political actions does not go for reason, harder rather politics, ethical experience, infinite responsibility, and by each other creatures, independent vulnerability, and demands self-doing motivational force enter into political secrets, suffering injustice, believe ethics, so the politics is empty. 3rd, objectification, viewing the world through identity, commodifies and treats agents as objects in life for more domination by the oppressive, Joel 799. This process of objectification makes another familiar reducing identity to the form of domesticated words starting getting surrender objects as a reduction of identity, something new that circle statements may mean the same way the world domination and other dominating possibly control the oppressive objectification and occurs and determine how it is to be dominated constructive responsibilities back to oppression. 4. Education, academic spaces like debate require discussion centered around non-totalization between inclusive spaces and new educational models. 14. The relationship with students is the most important part of education. Highlight differences or uniqueness between them and their maturity. Educators conduct good home contact with the survey of words through the opportunity to interact with the people who celebrate diversity including the most pedagogy because of teacher. 5. Oppression, violence, places totalization begot 99. Spaces and places of denial, irreducible otherness, exclusive form relation to the same woman in the being by rejecting the objective while when even possible instead basing everything on the other can decide to use ethically essence of the person but ethically hospitality. 6. Systems suppose the ontological oppression comes to be when societies totalize the other on the basis of social category. The only solution to this is to re-emphasize radical system of infinite responsibility those considered subhuman towards 7. Giving us benefits and of the other without the other there would be no being the ontological comes to the expense of the self-other relation being aims to reduce the other with knowledge by ways of raising case the opposite of the absolute responsibility from natural the idea raising connotation to special concrete reality ratio subject to receive really the consequences of imitation completely but different academic position. 7. Only if an obligation to motivate action has the possibility to allow for continuous critique system. 11. The infinite relationship aims at number reduction to if the other gives a perspective of human normal relations social relations and to same and unquenchable without satisfaction we despair to respond to a relationship with my person the question by powers and faces and these others responsibility can be preferred never satisfied consciousness. 8. Not that the theory of framework is no static conception of ideal society but granted immaterial analysis different allow for respect and inclusion of other tagline. Ulterior undergoes something that the being rewarded different future to things and so does assurances mean always action which may not be predicted would be nothing at all. 9. 11. Not seen at this perform the precondition for decolonial after the source. 12. Murder breaks the fundamental relationship between the colonization until recognition of humanity colonized into inferior love not having philosophical layer discussion colonial disposing the colonial omniverse part of the western fabric second the edge of respect placing simulation infinite separation offense. Plain justice requires open borders between Algeria and Morocco for human migration. I'm willing to meet all interests and further than rounded to purpose to remove the back to substance or undeniable inevitable proximity to other pieces of ontological responsibility for the transgressive physical borders. 11. 8. 11. Not surges recognition of infinite responsibility to the borders change and noble ignorant that separate as an ethical proximity challenge rigidity and requires the possibility to stable proximity for respecting responsibility of that care and unconditional responsibility hospitality requires demand of us requires the open borders is the only option for refugees to the first stabilizing situation. George 9. The notion of hospitality dominance and conditional things and hospital treatment never justified especially without figures and assumable at the end of cyber responsibility substitution being in one's skin hospitality not undone completed the permanent condition and the Algerian Moroccan border closures of burden of colonialism governments and separated families and this is illegitimate because based on assimilated natives in the category of the colonized Soul Brigade. Morocco Algeria border troops of flame belong to put your families after life to be educated people over the side of both sides are united by pledge along the border descends to the same because of these border closing tragic families interact and underview. First 183, even I've got this to check even negative abuse, even drop the debater, so when it is rough, please keep film abuse and substance time investment and theory, sequence, RVS, 6 minutes, examination, sexual, when entry, force, no RVS, and preemptive violations either, though AC can't be expansion of the shell, because they can choose not to violate, but we risk them dumping for 13 minutes, sequence, keeping interest, 6 minutes, 26 shells more than enough time just for the inter, even fairness, education, voters, basic game portals, goes 2 fairness, and education, voters, basic game, then use rules, back teaching portals, goes views of life, procedures, away, 8 point testing, 3 controls, the ancient, like test, discussing truth value of any other arguments, making it a medication, even probability, the can actually solve substance excuse outside remedy, can rectify CUC, but all arguments, including the after the judge to value, question procedures, innovative self, deep point, impact, reason drop the different levels of from mistakes applies to all questions versus well. Third, negative defend the converse of the rest. 8 point class, I discuss the plan, you didn't disclose the kind of advocacy. You being ready for the base. When you move trust, you have to only get the series alternative advocacy made off of the speed of 1 year secret 13 Q 4. Negative specific out of the after with the contention. 8 point strategy after when both theory and contention spending to 1 year dinner given the 2 to 1 event. They have to be 1 B point death first in debates and 1 party after child debates and everything. Always break up when people read different rounds, but you want to see round 5. All K links must be checked in CX. 8 point prosecutors start to be early for the X and negative doesn't make incorrect perceptions. People regress by direction K links and quantity universality bad to losing becoming bad means always find the link, never find the Benjamin best strategy. 6. All feelings specifically specific to the EC keeps specifically after which parts specifically disagree which ensure by the project skip. 7, 8. If I will win their vote after protecting negative 7 several makes more impossible to win. Even if forced to engage with the equity substance discussions of the vote have to prep for 9 in terms of counter into the AC takes a stance and Lexington part. This means you reevaluate the AC after the inter and evaluate the debate after the 1 hour. So we both get 1 rebuttal. 10 neg may not take touchdown. They already get 13 minutes of free round cup, which should compensate enough for reciprocity. 11 neg reject neg every response. They can be 7 minutes of every 4 minute when you can't make strategic choices concede certain parts of trades out in that specific line. 12 neg or actually skip the rest of those. Go back to the go to the method. Citizenship is not exclusion. We can redeploy citizenship in transformative ways, finding alternative strategies, practicing film theory, king 16. Representation, green ways of thinking about blind portability, legal citizen, not within green, other ways of being publicity, autonomy, positive stories, there are 79 of the movement, control, only for struggle, conflict, team, participation, engagement, people, movement, to both carry out, tries to keep them invisible, organize, moving, demands, voting, facts, and marines together, and reformism is a step in the right direction, doesn't propose revolution, danger 16. We recognize the form for some improvement, leading public service, for public support, with character, momentum, of publicity, media coverage, health, and strengthening the solution. Awesome, I'm marked off. Okay. Cool. I just started doing it. Pretty good? Yeah. Cool. Why read this app at the TOC?
Because I think it's a good app.
What constitutes good?
Rejecting totalization.
Rejecting totalization? Okay, so does the encounter with the other that you identify within the 1AC in your Levinas framework, does that require self-knowledge?
I think that's not really relevant to the framework. The framework isn't a question of if we have self-knowledge, it's rather a question of sort of whether or not we can sort of assimilate the other into our categories of, like, in relation to ourselves, if we can limit them to finite categories.
So your Levinas framework, explain what is the other? Or
The other is basically just anyone who's not us.
Anyone who's not us?
Yeah.
So what is Levinas's position on the other?
The other should not be totalized.
Should not be totalized?
Yeah.
Cool. Are there any instances in which we cannot encounter the other?
What does that mean?
Like which you cannot encounter the other. You are saying that we should not totalize the other, for instance.
I don't think that we always quote unquote encounter the other, but I think that sort of regardless of our encounters, like that doesn't disprove the fact
that doesn't not answer my question.
I don't understand the question. Like, if there's a specific example of you're thinking about of when you can't encounter the other, like I can talk about that. But like,
so the 1AC is just simply saying we should not totalize others.
We should.
What does the 1AC do to get to that point?
What does the 1AC do? We think that the plan is a good idea, and our defense of the plan is good.
You just said the plan's a good idea. Why? I'm asking.
Oh, okay. So basically, that's the offense, right? So it's basically saying a few things. The first one is that sort of by restricting someone at the border, we're totalizing them as an unwelcome foreigner, which means that sort of it is inherently totalizing them because it is sort of refusing.
So we should let everyone in instead. Is that the proposal?
What do you mean, let everyone in?
So how does that not homogenize everyone if you're saying we should just let everyone in?
It's not homogenizing necessarily because you're saying that you're open to encounters with.
What is the difference between totalizing and homogenization?
totalization, or I guess homogenization in this case wouldn't necessarily make sense because the argument is more that the principle of immigration is necessarily like something that is permissible and not something that the state has the power to restrict.
Not making sense. So okay, that doesn't answer my question. Why is your framework best for debate?
It's a true ethical framework.
Why is it good for debate? You just said the true ethical framework.
I don't think we should just read false frameworks in round, like that doesn't necessarily, that's illogical.
Why is it good for debate?
Why is it good for debate?
Yes.
I literally just answered.
You just said it's true in the abstract. My question is why is it good
It's
for
not-
debate?
okay.
Why is it the reading of this within this round good for debate?
Debate is a game. The resolution, we're defending the resolution. This is the normative framework that defines what justice is. Therefore, the act is a good idea.
So debate's a game, and then that does not explain why is your framework a good idea.
Because the resolution is true, and we should debate. Because debate is a game, we should sort
What
of.
does that get to us? Like, what does that give us specifically?
What do you mean? What does that give us?
You said
It's not
debate's a
supposed
game.
to-
You said we should debate it. Why?
Anything else is unfair. We've made several reasons in the undergrad why
Fairness.
fairness outweighs.
Okay, you talk about educational claims. What does that specifically have to do with your framework?
What is that?
Yeah, you
Theory and Phil are on separate layers.
separate layers. Which one comes first?
Theory.
Theory.
Like, we're not going to extend rule following paradox against theory. That's what you're asking.
Okay, we'll take running prep time starting now. Not too bad. Yes. Okay, chapter 240 used. I'm saying I don't want to stop. Sent. No, you get it. Could you shorten each leg, which is like short these ones?
All of them.
All of them.
why you love that conversation so much.
What's the order? It's gonna be the critique, one off. It's gonna be the framework. Then it's gonna be the case. It's gonna be under review.
Case as in one offense.
Yeah, like kind of probably.
Is there a critique in the note?
Critique in the case as order of the 1AC. So what you short. Is this one off? Good. Good?
I'm good.
Cool. Good. I'll skip the first going card. Going on to book list 15. Neoliberalism requires permanent economic crisis to continue cycles of accumulation and disposition. The 180 feeds into capitalist cog vis-a-vis their hopes for economic growth. Book list 15. The capacity to make political decisions may overtake my capital accumulation is enabled by disposition. This anticipated accumulation results in concentration of wealth. And neoliberal capitalism is haunted by contradictions. More successful wealth accumulation. This what if accumulation becomes how they manage to do so by dislocating. This makes a bubble path, only turning capitalism to stop cycles. As capital accumulation is a cycle crisis. Economic crisis seems to be a permanent condition. It to sustain itself. Neoliberal substitute permits it into society, making production form of social life. The one is increased movement of labor in a necessity, immersive social life and modernity to reorient civil society towards production. Greenhill 18. Capital increased own productivity and further organization of industry. The organization of labor reinforces the cooperation and intervention to the point of constructing self as a social activity. The social cooperation of labor is immersed in the digital connected and permeate all the economic organization of society. The extension of consumption and incineration, the incarceration of the capitalist production society strategy put to work. The social terrain production came to be closely interwoven with the forms of social life, the simplification of the industrial life, destroy the resistance of the working class, and working from effectively working to join to survive a society that surrounds them. The robust society, factories, integrated productive services that connect social labor, the technologies, and fundamental sciences, industrial services, and welfare. Digitalization and computerization become direct just as having the structural structure and capital. More importantly than automation, reimagining the worker means that it is becoming a economic at the global level. And the affirmative entrance into debate is that utterly test the affirmative iterative discursive practices that inculcate neoliberal subjectivity as per cross-sex, using academic jargon, using common tropes, citational politics that rely on the top scholarships, maximizing the benefits of their model, and more are part of the process of academic athleticism. This is independent indict to their notions of fairness. It produces academic power, cachet, and buy-in of the elites because there's a model for getting buy-in from all of them at all time. The neoliberal academy thus trains us to train ourselves to be maximally productive because capitalism has arrived. L23. Effective capitalism has a broad infrastructure with emergent culture in its class, gender history, emerged with value production, everyday life, adjusted to effective aspect of management practice with the focus of managing the intensity and quality of human relations. And this management of self-management works through complex interaction with community, reflexivity and effectivity with an ambiguous effective economy of both negative and positive effects of regulatory producing self-improving subjects that create better versions of themselves, creating the order and the soul of academicity and the stress of how becoming a professional self is a process where being culturally and intellectually academic is understood as a citation or reiterative for discourse with multiple contributing powers. Knowledge relation is required to harmonize with academic intensity within in the right way, become recognizable and passionate. Subject in academia means learning how to present oneself according to gender, appearance, speak jargon, while writing in a appropriate way, think and feel in a professional, submissive way, and contribute to the fusion of ethos of passionate attachment to academia in the face of normalized behavior. Academic effective athleticism is a concept that enables us to inquire at the same time and maturing the academic body that in disregard the academic practice are imbued with the rhetorical fetishization of the making of knowledge visible through outputs and traceable practices that literally manifestly raise individual profiles and constitute the selfless capacity to be researched and active by implication the individual deficit to the carrying out audit logic writing them publishing experience in the same referring to academic subject in what constitutes themselves as a country as an experience. Something that makes sense because especially in relation to published or peer change depends on your publication and the fact that impact typifies and dynamic and neoliberal corporate academia reflect the society they're part of, the micro models of them political economies and participating in broader webs of power equity also inscribed in recent practice also values of the evacuate political objection but also in perhaps in commitment race and many other gender and racial effect we try to engage in research that's in the different form where there's dangers that we are criticized and rejected not for contributing theory but doing rigorous academic practices and enact infrastructure barriers are inherently conservative and sympathy biased and you are unorthodox and interdisciplinary knowledge at the academic authenticity is not bounded to academic profession but it's instead of state becoming and leaving such reasonable life world publications memorialize a whole ideas is important that self and the presence of currency cut the current currency and the new age of capitalism is cannibalism extend a course of crisis to devour ourselves as quickly as possible. This affirmative solvency does not matter because it's just a question because it's just a spatial fix but the K outweighs in terms of case and the entire affirmative because a structural brilliant capitalism so it's inherently contradictory. Fraser 22. System coordinate injustice exploitation by capital benefits of capitalist costs consequently relentless exponential growth of capitalism irrational attention to economic financial system is entirely self-disabling purity drop and rate profit falling overaccumulation to fix it's like financial agent responsibility of reckoning ensuring the motion be proportional to capitalism cycles crisis of boom bust cycles of mass and unemployment wrongs of capital economic organization the capital concern for grounded in relations between economy non-economic condition division nutrition domination circle division between working and independent workers and racial oppression imperialism indigenous disposition and genocide that flips all their arguments about the case now onto the alternative thus alternative to opt out the money see this presents that disrupted the flow capitalist false promises that sustain neoliberalism and the constant drive to consume by going 16. The ties between creating promise for a better future, shaping the future, not supposedly in the horizon, but southern place to trade out the present. Their point is that one must imagine a future that will produce a level size of history and deny it. We do not need to believe that future with a deeper satisfaction to reject capitalism. The measuring stick for critique is not about promise for a better future, but capitalism's underlying structure, the identification of this structure provide the key for alternative capitalist functions because it provides such a while at the same time also obtain the satisfaction to failure about committing the perfect commodity. We be free from the cycle to kill capitalism. This way to eliminate the barrier to structural change and will create a different system. And on the framework, thus the role of the ballot is to analyze the one sees a research party to deconstruct neoliberal subjectivity. The one sees the impact on the assumption they have presented today. The affirmative can defend the assumption of the one see they should lose that's bad versus neoliberal subjectivity. The one sees mechanism to forward the product of capitalism, which we are in of. This means that you should view the level of authority at the level of the link. Insofar as a winning link, you should view this as a disadvantage to voting affirmative. Why it's not desirable, such as ethics formulation. Our theory such a subject for me to prove that the framing method of the one see through 11 knots and through the other is inaccessible because through capital we become alienated from ourselves and from others, which means we can't interact with them, which means there's no way that the one see has any framework. Has a framework. This is a higher level than their framework analysis because their analysis is not taking into account that capitalism necessitates alienation from oneself and others to extract capital for the sake of capitalist accumulation, which means we acted to internally to all the medical ethic theories because it's in how they come to form the ethics and the framing. First, every argument needs to claim warrant impact. If you didn't get the full justification in the one AC and the one AC don't, or on the one AC you don't evaluate the argument, also justifies new to in our answers and extrapolate to the above analytical blips within the 1A or bring new implication, all permissibly and presumption triggers. A point is that you mean the actions like genocide, slavery, and the N-word can't be allowed or can be morally condemned. That's something you should throw out, reject on face, especially in the education space of high school. Also dispute because they contradict basic intuition. So B point is no permissibility or presumption trigger. B or structure triggers, etc. You should reject them wholesale because there's always a 1% risk of some impact that cannot be resolved. No need for this entire debate. And we specifically said that we specifically read links to the 1AC. Now, all this stuff about all the transcendental truth on the other, we've already done that on the affirmative debate as the reasons why you do not get access to any of these impacts insofar as they now actually intertwine that actually answer the specific neoliberalism, neoliberal subjectivity that undergird the entirety of things like other because we can never come to contact with the other, which takes out all their stuff. Which takes out all their Levinas offense and all their flips on genocide offense, which means that it fundamentally flips out onto offense proper, or the plan. First on the plan, I'll have a specific link as per our Greenhill evidence that talks about why specific things like open borders is bad because it increases things like labor mobility, also is a form of globalization that also links a bit all the neoliberal things like neoliberal subjectivity on the other view. First, you should reject theory. K operates at the highest level insofar as when the link as to why the fairness in the neoliberal academia is in of the friend, which comes first. It flips all their educational standards, also all their fairness standards, because it's only a question of who is fair for, etc. We are not in of every single for all fairness, i.e. things falling in speech time, but our argument is that specifically their form of fairness, i.e. needing to read things like frivolous theory, to try to disengage with things like neoliberalism is something that's specifically bad. Now, they say you should not evaluate the 1A, you should evaluate the debate after 1A, you should just reject this on face, it's bad for education, also kills any fairness, because there's no reason why we're specifically spending our time in the day, this one hour within this debate, run over to debate, which takes out all their offense. Second is that all the other arguments about how the K needs specific links, etc. These are simply just not warranted at all. I.e., their idea about how we need specific, about how you need to value after the 1A or how K link can be checked. There's simply just no interpretation of this, etc. And you should also just operate K at the highest level, which means that education always fairness because it's the reason why we come to debate. But the texture of education does matter, which our framework is the reason why we actually the best form of education. You should evaluate every speech. K times before 1 year. Yeah.
Status of the alt.
That's an alternative, unconditional.
Unconditional, okay. I guess let's start on the framing. Is the K psychoanalytic at all?
The K psychoanalytic? No.
No? Okay.
I did not read them like the first one card.
Okay, cool. I guess on the Girardi link,
yep.
This is about how testing the affirmative is bad. I guess we're testing the critique as well, how it's not bidirectional.
The alternative is a form to reject the 1AC. Our argument this presents a disruption to the flow of capitalist logics within academia. Your 1AC, but specifically, specifically in cross-links, when I asked you, why is this good within debate? You're like iterative testing, things like clash, things like it's good because the ethical theory is good, and I kept asking you why is this specifically within debate? And everything you keep on doing, this reiterative discourse of testing the affirmative through ethics, etc., is something that is bad. Our argument is the alternative, test it, but test it on a different layer. When instead of testing it, you should reject the F. Opt out.
What do you do instead?
And also, when you say testing, it's not that negating your affirmative, i.e., our form of negation is bad, but it's rather that your formulation of how you try to think about your interpretation is bad.
What does it look like to opt out?
What does it look like to opt out? Don't do the F. You think we should reject the affirmative? Go neg.
Just presume the status quo. Just do nothing.
We have read links to reasons to why your 1AC is bad. Our argument is we should opt out.
Is a bad idea, but what do we do instead? Do we just presume the status quo?
What do you mean? Our argument is you do not do anything outside this debate. You do not implement open borders.
So what do
you
you
do these things?
What do you do that's better?
Our argument is within debate, within the space that we have right now. You should opt out of the 1AC. If we win a link as the reason why you feed into neoliberal subjectivity, it's a reason to why.
Okay, I guess why is neoliberalism bad?
Neoliberalism bad. Every single one of our cards contextualizes it. First, it flips all your stuff about all your framework about Levinas. Our ethical formulation argument would be that, for instance, your stuff about how should not like homogenize or we should not like totalize the other. Our argument is we cannot access the other in the first place. Why?
Okay. Is your theory of capitalism universal? Like, is it making this structural claim about institutions?
What do you mean a structural claim about institutions? It
says that is there a singular way that capitalism functions
for every social life.
Yeah.
I mean, our argument is that neoliberalism specifically overcodes society in a way that is bad. Arguments will defend that. I don't know what you keep meaning by like.
That's fine.
Universalism.
I guess. Can you explain the Fraser evidence?
The Fraser evidence.
Yeah.
The Fraser evidence is a reason to why crisis theory, and a reason to why capitalism is in contradiction with itself and only produces a form of crisis, which means that capitalism collapse is inevitable. Is a reason to why things like neoliberal subjectivity is bad, because the capital and the commodity now define social life. For instance, between co-workers, you don't view them as people.
Justified consequences matter.
Huh?
Wherever justified consequences matter, this seems to be about like climate change or like profits in banks and stuff. Like, what's the impact of your?
First off, on consequences, we do not have to win consequentialism to win this debate.
This is the impact of that card is consequentialist.
What do you mean the impact of this card is consequentialist? Our argument is capitalism right now as it is, so it does not require some sort of consequentialist. We are not winning that extinction first. Our argument is that our framework specifically hijacks your framework, and we think that things in induction are good because it allows us, for instance, to make decisions and to analyze things. Otherwise, the 1AC also wouldn't be possible.
Answer, but that's fine. I'll take try. Is it a floating pig? Is it a floating pig?
No.
4 minutes.
Cool.
Just look at that. There's one part I'll say really quick. Order is just going to be the underview, the case. It's going to group the framework and the offense together, and then the K.
Wait, say that again.
The underview, case, K.
Underview, case, K.
This is oh yeah, I see. Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Top level, no need to responses that have a green, or they can say the main class 363 sandbagging implications clear out of the one and see it's don't reject theories. The question of if we can engage, which would reject the question of the critique of neoliberal academia. They can see that all of our reasons fairness always looks on the K. They say fairness for who, but it's a question of everyone in debate series because everyone is sort of able to sort of participate in debate, whether there's structural disadvantages. The debate space cannot actually necessarily solve that, which means that they don't actually get offense to any of that, and also takes the education always fairness. So I guess we'll do more on the K now. The K now they conceded that if I won't label app, otherwise they'd just be able to sandbag with a bunch of layers, especially since they have especially since they have 7 minutes to just sandbag, which means that they would automatically win, which means if I win any sort of flow in this debate, any layer like the app or the sort of critique or like off framework offensive under my framework or the critique, I mean that is sufficient for you to vote affirmative. That is sufficient for you to vote affirmative right there. Cool on the framing. The thesis 11 asks the totalization table here because of understanding the other handling fitness of the categories and poses up for connection to the continued governing the mystery that results in the end of it. That necessitates the borders for the totalization of immigrants into welcome, unwelcome binary top levels that even if my framework is violent or incoherent, you conceded one is equal with shakes and empirical study to indicate that academic space selectivation uniquely use 11 Austrian pedagogy in order to recognize the diversity of those around us, which is key to inclusion proper discussions that proceed in the first place. They say we didn't answer neoliberal subjectivity, but it's not a question of if self is alienated, it's a question of whether how we categorize instead of evaluate the other people, which proves that the permutation because it proves that my theory of sort of the other and your theory of the self is necessarily non-mutually exclusive. Second is that the negri hard stuff will answer on the like turns on the K on the K. One favorite only valid post has about the topic. Anything else is outside of resolution parent system 6 was the one to see fairness that ways. Even in terms of good debate is a game can't stop loss, but can't stop fairness, making the most proximate impact between all arguments including K presume they're divided at least even in terms of K because we can't properly test it if we were disadvantaged. Rigorous testing class defining by students turn education impact turns their impact in a class will do the line by line later. Second case outweighs even the impact of capitalism as a consequence of presumed totalization how the other would act, but Levinas's sources we reject reducing other people to categories of monetary value. Equal Levinas hijacks the theory of power. Individuals are constrained by limited viewpoints and experiences. The universal theories of power are incorrect because it assumes that we have a perfect understanding of how the world and those within it operate, which is intrinsically categorizes people according to these behaviors. Third, trying to do both opening borders enables movements to better organize across state lines without being cracked down upon. This prerequisite to effective organizing to the alternative because the state options are scaling up. 4, permutation to the alternative reject other instances, which means rejecting their instances, rejecting sort of psychoanalytic capitalism or capitalism, whatever, except in the instance of 1 AC double blind. If you all can't overcome links, if you can't solve their impacts with large 5, link turn open borders, key active domination, remove flexibility, bubble, continue 1. Open border chains, instead of your transactional process, and ability between capital maintain capital friendly laws, that will activate the guarantees, pertain vending restriction, paralyze, partly regular behavior, is right for domination, potential expectations, and the link is backward capital speed control, non-mobility, open borders, less established, shotgun. 20. Cap spontaneophobic granting comparatively having the border versions for sexual and labor. The first case in the teamwork and pathways national line separation. 6. No link Algeria and Morocco specifically don't have big corporations to exploit people with regular migration. Immigration flows already used to maximize utility. We're just providing people the opportunity to put food on the table, which is system opportunity. In the meantime, we all 7 extended induction flow. The past cannot provide explanatory power of the because it presumes the singular way to retention, which is generalizing because we can't develop new experiences to overcome these past obstacles. And 8 is that you conceded on the underview that sort of questions and representations to drop the argument to let us learn from mistakes to be forced to find a valid practice, which we shouldn't be forced to find representations justified permutation to the alternative. The line by line we call it. This isn't a policy act. We don't hope for economic growth anywhere in the AC. If anything, we resist capitalist control by letting people mobilize against borders and letting people lead instead of being stuck in abusive working conditions. Capitalist and angry hard evidence movement of labor is inevitable. Irregular migration instead of who the state can still regulate, and the act just forces them to allow unconditional movement to reverse capitalism. The already evidence first meritocracy. Perfect because you also want the balance. You're saying that I did the better debating. I worked hard to for me, and you want your K to be tested as well. Plus, they also use a lot of academic jargon and sort of high theory, which reasons you link out with because you link in. So that second, we don't do anything. You participate in the debate space. We apply the academy, but these like paying for it. We can still talk about market viewpoints as well. The opposite of the archives, naturalization, the fairness as a model of line, not all productivity. That is a question of doing it in a positive sense. On the phrase of evidence was consequences about the consequences caused by induction flows and making predictions, and also butterfly that each consequence is future consequences. You can't know if it actually did that good. The McGowan evidence first, you don't do anything. CS was damning. It doesn't. What does it look like to opt out? What do we do instead? They maintain the same system. So after perception to choose, this is like what analytics talks about desire, which is not so very probably because you can go into someone else's mind off the framework stuff on your level of subjectivity. This begs the question whether we can engage in a critique of capitalism to begin with, which sort of means the concession of our argument is especially damning for them. Off the second argument, capitalism alienating oneself is a consequence and not relevant because we're about the other of capitalism rejection. Necessitates rejecting alienation. That proves Levinas because it proves we shouldn't totalize the other and necessarily proves the firm, and also you can just classify the argument from the top insofar as it haven't necessarily answered insofar as they haven't necessarily answered the fact that it's not a question of the self, it's a question of how we totalize the other.
Cool. I believe I have 220 left. Starting that now. Mm-hmm. Okay. Order is going to be the K proper, so it's going to be an overview. Then after that, it's going to be framework, which you should have the Levinas and our framework.
As in on the case flow?
On the K flow. I kind of grouped them within
On the
the
K flow.
Well, kind of on both. That's how I grouped them, at least on my flow. I had all the framework stuff there, the research stuff, and the Levinas framework stuff there.
Yeah.
Then after that, it's going to be link, perm, alt, then it's like line by line. And then it's going to be their underview / case stuff, which they kind of just grouped it all together.
I'm good.
Cool. You are voting negative on the two links that went massively mishandled in their mishandling of the entire framework debate because they only had like a 10-second response to all of our stuff about how our framework specifically accesses all their Levinas offense. Now, there's three arguments that end this debate. First is that capitalism is subjective. It writes itself into a body in such a way that the drive to accumulate appears as a natural feature of social life and alienation that becomes inevitable. They concede that Fraser 22 evidence was such a game over issue because it means we access all their Levinas offense because it means that even if they win things like the totalitizing people are bad or homogeneity is bad, etc. The open borders only homogenizes people more. There, from academic links that I'm going to win on the link level also only totalitizes them more. And our argument is that capitalism is subjectivizing insofar as that capital and the commodities overdetermine all of our social relations, meaning we can never have interaction with the other in the first place, which it flips all their stuff about how you can use Levinas as a sort of framework in order to establish things like ethics. Second is that capitalism is bloodthirsty. Labor is the only form of capital capable of producing things like surplus value. The very structure of accumulation requires stealing value from the working class, which they conceded off of Rabocalus as well as a Fraser evidence. This debate is not whether or not capitalism can be made better or whether or not they can be reformed to do things like open border, but rather the foundational question is whether or not we should accept exploitation as an inevitable feature of the world. Third is that other worlds are possible, but continuously investing in capital order gives teeth to coercive power and precludes revolutionary imagination. Voting F has consequences, which means that you should vote negative step to opt out. It replicates the choices that we make every single day that facilitate normalization, which means that you should opt out instead of doing the affirmative, because the affirmative has consequences. Win on the link debate, not on the framework debate. For framing, they've massively mishandled this price. The relevant judges to analyze the 180s of reach project. Let them weigh the case. Sure, fine, whatever. Our argument is that it's a question of whether or not the app is a good idea. Insofar as we've been linked, it's a reason why the affirmative is bad, because it promotes things like alienation. There's no fairness argument. Cap is a core topic. It's not our fault that they have not theoretically justified their relationship to things like capital. Alienation is the biggest impact within this debate because it produces distinctions between people that justify all manners of violence. The thesis of our critique is that capital determines our relationality with people, i.e. with the co-workers, within people who we work with, etc., and how we work with, and the people that we meet every single day, and specifically within debate, which I'll be academically below. But how is it that we come to identify with others, but not the people around us that we just who makes our computers, who makes our clothes, who makes our cell phones, who makes our coffee cups, and the very thing that makes debate? What are the preconditions of this disavowal of suffering that undergirds our everyday decision making? Only the negative provides an answer. The types of ethical calculations that 180 asks you or makes the broad assumption that we can interact with this other, that we can prevent to do things like open boards. The affirmative never implements things like open boards, which means the only question of whether the research project now are ethical. Subjectivity argument turns every single one of their arguments about their attempt to not totalitarize the other. You can classify that from above. Additionally, I'll just extrapolate more. Their only response to things like the only response to things like the framework was that alienation to things like irrelevant. Our argument that alienation means that we can never identify with things like social relations, which means that we can never embrace with the other, etc. We can never actually embrace with the other, etc., which only causes forms of totalitization. That's actually net worse than the affirmative, which means that because we become so alienated because of commodities and constant capital, that we become so alienated from the people around us and the people who make our own commodity, which they completely conceded off the Fraser evidence, which is game over issue. Second is they also double term this out because they are also a form of homogenization insofar as they also view all migrants that we just need to let all of them in, etc., which is additional link into the cap cave. The link proper. First, I'm going to be going for two links. First, the academic link. They've massively miscovered this. The academic athleticism link turns case and proves that their ethics disconnects us and proves that the reason why they can't solve any of issues. Their only argument is that we also are in debate, except that we also use academic jargon. Our argument is that we know you cannot become in debate, but that you should view the opting out of the 180s as a form of infiltration that infiltrates their method. It's a reason that disrupts the cycle of the flow of the capitalist feature. The 180 process was damning. The 180 process was basically we need to try to iteratively test people or iteratively test our ethics within other types of ethics, i.e. the Levinas versus Khan, etc. But our argument, these things are fundamentally bad. It's a reason why you should throw the entirety of 180 out the window. The second thing they specifically said on our link debate is that the butterfly effect and induction is bad. You've also conceded that we also get new tune our answers insofar it was not justified nor implicated. They have not claimed impact and warrant within the 180. The 180's document about why induction etc. fails. It's just literally the same thing like the butterfly effect. We cannot view things like features etc. with no implication nor impact at all, which obviously justifies why we should get new answers to this. You can obviously use induction, i.e. if I hold up a pen and I drop it, I obviously know that something can obviously happen. Obviously I can know that the pen can fall and I can still use it like reasoning etc. And that's specifically in the context of capitalism. We obviously see and specifically within academic work that is now part of the effective economy of capitalism, training and debate, shifting the author, utilizing generic tropes and tags that have been made familiar by good debaters that have come before you are all part of the process of cultivating this academic cash, which is the reason why you should reject the affirmative on faith. Debate is a microcosm of systems that power up logic. We reproduce the religion as the economy of balance shapes us, pushes us to by managers, and treat us for conformity. You must publish new versions of the affirmative and reinvent your story, your story. You must have an impact. You must test the affirmative right through your ranks and test it within philosophy. This is of our link into I think like academic athleticism, which means that only the negative opting out can actually solve it. Second is the globalization thing. They've also massively undercovered this. Their only cards were two very under-highlighted cards. It's the reasons why capitalism control is happening through things like borders. But our argument is that you can see the negative heart analysis that it directly interacts with it and talks about how the attempt to open things like borders and to do not homogenize, totalitarize each other to in itself what allows neoliberal corporations to extract surplus labor because it allows for the inversion of state control and that neoliberal control, which the entirety of the thesis of the Bokel's evidence as well, the Fraser evidence, both way conceded again. They've dropped the negative heart analysis, which means that open borders allows for the capitalist exploitation to happen more because the nation state no longer has much power, but rather it's into the hands of capitalist or corporations that can literally just subsume any form of regulation. They're true cards. You should read them afterwards. It's not very good. It talks about things like ethno-nationalism, but it's obviously not contextual at all. Now the alternative, they basically drop the alternative. The alternative is to say no. This entails us looking for solutions within the capitalist order or demanding concrete alternatives to it. Their only argument is that there's no spillover claim, but we do not need to win a sort of big spillover claim. The 180 has posed a question about whether we ought to endorse their interpretation of justice. The critique said the answer is no. The world demands a type of redress, which the firm has not provided the links proof that their permutation specifically about another permutation. First, all the permutations are severance because they literally sever your server out of it. You should also hold the line against all the permutations because they're not implicated as to why they specifically should link. The permutation do both argument makes no sense because we are literally a rejection of the affirmative. Second, they say permutation do the affirmative and all non-mutually exclusive parties of the term. This is not massive. This is not explained at all, which obviously means that you have to vote, which means you obviously have to vote for which means that this permutation simply does not stand because the fact that it co-opts radicalness. Because our argument, insofar as we make the academic athleticism link, is to either throw the entirety of the 180 out. They say permutation do the alternative. This has no implication either. And simply, how do you do the alternative? Our argument, the alternative is not a floating pick or anything like that. They say flexibility is good for things like capitalism. Our argument is that yes, flexibility is good for things like capitalism, but that is what open board is in the first place. Now, on the case that they did not read a single theory argument, but Kate outweighs theories and independent reason to drop the team. The critique implicates that what seemingly neutral complex things like fairness means in the first place. Our argument is a sequencing question is the reason why neoliberal subject to be specifically bad outweighs their fairness education claims, but even if they win fairness, we're not unfair. That's where all the framework stuff.
Okay, the order is just going to be underview, then K. It's going to start with an overview, case and K together. It's going to start with an overview, and then it'll go into K proper.
You said underview, then case and K together.
Yeah.
Then what?
Underview, case and K, like an overview, just like framing the round, and then the upper line by line.
Yeah, I'm good.
Framing issues that they've conceded if I win one layer vote, anything else less than up layer with infinite rounds making layers making it possible to win, which means that if I have won either layer, i.e. I have won either offense under Levinas or offense under under the critique, that is sufficient for you to vote affirmative because it means that it is increased the most substantive discussion, which also had implications under education. Fairness outweighs the controls our ability to sort of test the K. Otherwise, you can evaluate whether the claims are about things like capitalism even true in the first place, which was conceded, which means that you can evaluate they can't leverage the K against theory because I presume we could engage with the K in the first place. And also, we're not rejecting your academia through this the specific analytic. We're just framing how you should evaluate it. They themselves said it's a question of the types of fairness. That's why they agreed with the other things like rules, but not this, not things like framework. Which means that this should frame your evaluation of the round. It's not excluding the K. It was just fully conceded. Even if they can each win our responses, they just didn't make one. The K. Top levels of this case fully incoherent. They cannot win. They cannot just win that we should reject capitalism because it infiltrates academia. That to provide a normative justification why capitalism is bad. I'm going for perm to the all in all instances except the alpha, which means rejecting capitalism, except in the instances of capitalism, except in the 1AC. Winning that the 1AC is good is sufficient to duplicate and functions as efficiency. Framing claims to benefit. Concession of the double bind is damning for them because either the K can't solve capitalism by opting out, in which case it should be able to overcome links to the F, or it can't overcome a singular instance of capitalism, i.e. the F, in which case it doesn't solve anything. So vote affirmative on presumption. The K proper frame it. The thesis of Levinas is that we should reject totalization because the other is infinitely noble, which requires open borders. Because otherwise we're totalizing immigrants as unwelcome foreigners. You should evaluate this offense as evaluate this debate as who's winning offense under the winning framework. World about means nothing insofar as we have made a counter sort of framing claim that of Levinas, and you conceded the discussions under Levinas are good because empirical surveys prove that it sort of allows us to embrace more diversity of viewpoints and be more open to mindsets like the alternative in the first place. Also proves the permutation on the framework page, but independently, I'll just do the line by line. Now I'll just do the line by line here. They say that they talk about the drive to accumulate, but you can see that you can't verify drives because that presumes that we can sort of assume make universal thesis of subjectivity, but so far as the others are fit, you can't do that, and you can't go into someone else's psychoanalysis non-verifiable and say that it is overdetermined social relations, but that doesn't necessarily matter because it's a question of consequences. Induction failed because it relies on past induction to prove it true. All the arguments about how sort of capitalism is infiltrating society presume universal theorizations of how capitalism functions, which is in and of itself totalizing, and sort of can't account for the various perspectives and experiences people actually have within the sort of institution of capitalism, which means that it doesn't solve any of our social relations, and concede it's not a question of alienation of the self, but a question of how we sort of treat other people, which means that it doesn't necessarily matter. They say that the pen will drop. That's an instance of using induction to prove it true, which means that the critique itself has no impact. They say cap is bloodthirsty, but so they say cap is bloodthirsty. That doesn't necessarily. Once again, this is a necessarily consequence. Everyday choices don't necessarily matter because you can see that we don't actually absorb content proven by things like suicide debate. They say they talk about the capitalism link turn, but have considered that there are no corporations to exploit anyone in Algeria and Morocco specifically, which means that we don't have any. Which means that there's no labor exploitation, but open borders allows us to mobilize on both sides, which is fully conceded, which means that we can better do the alternative of the academia link. They've conceded the fact that they don't actually disrupt cycles of flow because no one actually absorbs what goes on in the round. Also takes up their arguments about framework and takes up their arguments about the alternative. They say it's permanent evidence, but they consider that that's good because it means that we can learn from mistakes, which means that you can do the all. GG. Good debate.